All right. So hello to everyone, and thank you very much for joining today's live session, which is jointly produced by the German Chamber of Commerce in Korea and the Swiss Business Hub Korea. My name is Roger Zwindel. I'm working for the Swiss Business Hub here in Korea. Together with me today here in Seoul are Felix from the German Chamber and Sue, our producer, and also from the German Chamber. And of course, one of our panelists, Mr. Thomas Schmidt, Head of Siemens Digital Industries Korea. Joining us in a minute from Switzerland is Peter Röcklisberger, the CEO of the company Solaccess. Thomas and Peter are the panelists, and I will do some additional introductions right before the panel. Today's program consists of two parts. Felix will start with some insights in the New Deal, and this will then be followed by a discussion with our two panelists. So without further ado, I hand it over to Felix for his presentation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm very much delighted to have you all on board. So we will talk about the New Deal today. So what I will do now is I will give a brief overview of our research findings. And after our sort of key findings of the New Deal, we will do a panel discussion. To give you a bit of an intro on the industry of Korea, Korea is one of the most innovative economies in the world. It has been dominating Bloomberg's Innovation Index for the past few years. Also this year it's ranked first. I think Switzerland is on the third place and Germany on the fourth place this year. Korea is the 12th largest economy in the world and also part of the Club 30-50, which means that the country has a GDP per capita over 30,000 USD and a population for more than 50 million. A bit similar to Germany's economy, also the manufacturing sector is quite important in the Korean economy. Almost 1/3 of the gross value added is produced in manufacturing. So key industries in Korea is automotive, machinery, electronics, ICT, semiconductors, steel, petrochemicals, and shipbuilding. Probably some of you are also using Korean electronic products to join this, LG and Samsung, for instance. So yeah, thanks for using the products on behalf of the Korean economy. Of course, the Korean economy is also impacted by COVID, especially since Korea is an export-driven economy. However, the situation compared to other countries is not as bad. So the Korean economy shrank by 1% last year and is forecasted to grow by 3% this year. So the question is, how much can the New Deal contribute to this economic growth? So the actual situation in terms of the COVID cases has been around 500 in the past days, except for the last 2 days where we went above 600. But if you compare that to the overall caseload and the percentage of the population who has contracted the virus, I think it's not too bad, again, compared to other countries. And most importantly also is that there hasn't been any strict measures such as lockdowns in Korea. Okay, so let's talk about the New Deal. We'll briefly give you a bit of an overview of the key components of the New Deal, and then we talk about the digital and the Green Deal. So as you probably already know, the New Deal has several pillars. In particular, the Digital New Deal and the Green New Deal are the key pillars that we also focus on in our research. We didn't really look into the social safety net, and the Regional New Deal was something announced a bit later by the government, which basically just means an allocation of the investments with a regional focus rather than in the Seoul metropolitan region. The focus is more in the other regions of the country. So here you see a bit of an overview of how the investments are distributed. And of course, there were like the biggest portion of these overall 160 trillion Korean won is being allocated actually to the Green New Deal. So if you look at the structure of the New Deal, you have what we call the 10 key projects. And in these 10 key projects, there are some projects that are designated to the Digital New Deal, and then some projects that are refer to the Green New Deal. And then there's some overlap between those. And under these key projects, we again have a total number of 28 projects. And these projects are then again associated with one of the three pillars. So what we did in our research is actually that we focused just on a couple of these key projects where we thought there could the potential could be the biggest there for foreign companies, and which are data dam, smart healthcare, digital twin, green remodeling, green energy, and eco-friendly mobility. So the New Deal is a pretty big program, so that makes it also a bit complicated in a sense. To give you a bit of a glimpse on how I would say how confusing it can be on the first side is the next slide, because you have the 10 key projects, the 28 total projects, and then again we have tasks, which are further distribution of allocated funds and what is expected to come out of this. But I won't go into details of this. If you like to take a look at it, it's also in the original documents quite well displayed, this table. So let's look into the details of the key projects. And we'll start with the Digital New Deal. In particular, we'll start with the data dam, which is key project number one. And that has allocated quite a remarkable number of investments of 18.1 trillion Korean won, which is almost 14 billion euros. The key idea of this data dam is basically to have a pool of data that can be used for several purposes, in particular to integrate AI, artificial intelligence, into various areas. And for these areas, the government distinguished between 7 key areas, which is educational AI, but also what they call AI vouchers. So basically the idea is to help companies, especially SMEs, integrate AI solutions in their businesses. And that works through these so-called AI vouchers, which can be obtained from KData's website. There's also more information on that, where you have basically some companies helping other companies to integrate AI. And of course, for that, you also need a certain infrastructure, data centers, and cloud platforms to enable these goals. The data market itself in Korea is expected to grow quite remarkably, as the graph shows, or the table shows on this page. And of course, that also goes in line with building the infrastructure, 5G coverage into this. So basically, what the data dam, or what's expected from the data dam, is that it will further strengthen Korea's already strong ICT market, which has a market volume of around 479 trillion Korean won. And so I believe that especially Korea's strength, which are very strong on the hardware side when it comes to semiconductors, connectivity, 5G, and so on. I think this will be complemented with software platform cloud solutions in connection with AI. So quite interesting area, I believe. And it's also, I would say, the digital part sort of is like the cross-cutting area in this entire program. In terms of investments, the smart healthcare is actually rather small. It's actually the smallest key project here in terms of investments. However, I think it's quite exciting and quite interesting. Of course, healthcare is important during a pandemic, but if you look at the goals and what the plans are, it's also quite interesting. So by 2025, there should be, or the plan is to have 18 smart hospitals. And on top of that, it's more encouraged to use wearables and smart healthcare apps to monitor your health status. And here again, also we have the integration of AI when it comes to helping doctors diagnosing certain diseases. So this is interesting, of course, because of recent developments. Telemedicine, for instance, has temporarily been approved. And well, it's quite possible that this will become more of a permanent solution, that healthcare or that telemedicine is also available in the future. Large hospitals have traditionally been the front runners when it comes to smart healthcare solutions in Korea. For example, to just give you a few numbers, the Seoul National Universal Hospital is quite big, and as such, it's also responsible for generating a third of the R&D revenue of the top 20 hospitals. It's quite remarkable, and in that field, in the healthcare or digital healthcare, the telecommunication companies such as KT are also quite active, especially when it comes to building the infrastructure, building 5G or equipping hospitals with 5G networks. So I would say two or at least three benefiting factors for healthcare market in Korea. On the one hand, you have a very much aging society. On the other hand, you have public healthcare services that are being expanded by the government. And then, of course, through the pandemic, there's just more focus on this area, and people realize, oh yeah, healthcare is important to us. So, of course, there are opportunities in several areas. When we look at the healthcare market, or let's say the medical device market, which has been already growing quite a bit before the pandemic, there will be further growth to be expected. And interestingly, in this sector is that actually more than 60% of the high-tech healthcare medical devices are being imported. So I think this will continue to be an interesting field. And well, medical tourism at the moment, not so much, but I'm sure it will bounce back at some point again. So the other key projects are digital twins, which are very much key when it comes to infrastructure planning. So infrastructure, especially in a city, is quite expensive. And in order to plan it more efficiently, it's great if you have a digital twin, a digital version of the real world, where you can plan different scenarios and then calculate what is the difference when I, redirect traffic flows in a certain area, or when I have my infrastructure below ground, when I realign this and then innovate it. So this, of course, has an impact on smart cities, which is also a very big hot topic in Korea, where we have a lot of smart city developments on green fields. But of course, also other areas outside of cities, such as smart seaports, where we have pilot projects where full automation is also used with digital twin platforms. And I'm sure Siemens will be able to tell us a bit more when it comes to digital twins and smart manufacturing. So of course, here again, opportunities when it comes to, of course, software, how to manage data that is being, fed into these digital twin models, but also you have to collect data from the real world. And for that collection of data, you need certain measuring devices, you need sensors, and similar to the medical devices, also in this field, 60% of all these sensors or devices are being imported from abroad. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the Green New Deal. So the Green New Deal has the biggest investments and overall. And one interesting sector is, of course, green remodeling, making buildings more energy efficient and integrate renewables or integrate solar energy into buildings. That is pretty much the key idea here. And at the focus here are public buildings. So public buildings are supposed to, the new public buildings are supposed to be zero energy buildings and also bigger privately owned buildings. Big question here is, of course, how much of a pull effect will this have on privately owned buildings? Because 70% of the buildings are older than 15 years in Korea. And if you've been to Korea, you will see that some buildings are not necessarily built to last. I think an average apartment block, for instance, has a lifespan of around 40 years. So there's a lot of, I would say, potential or questions what will happen to this building stock. This, of course, presents opportunities for companies who are active in the building sector, especially when it comes to integrating renewables or components that help buildings to achieve zero energy standards. So I think we have a bit of good examples and case studies from Germany or from Switzerland for Europe and overall. So quite interesting field indeed. One big area, of course, is also the green energy production. So the government plans to invest in total 11.3 trillion won by 2025. And here the key is on photovoltaic and wind energy. So the capacity of currently 12.7 gigawatts is supposed to be increased within just 6 years to 42.7 gigawatts. So quite ambitious target. And especially when it comes to offshore, there's a bit of a technology gap between Korean companies and European companies. So I believe that by having test beds, the idea is to try to catch up in this term, sort of like a technology gap here. Of course, also the goal is to make photovoltaic a bit more attractive financially for also private players. And also an interesting field is hydrogen. So hydrogen will play, of course, a key role in mobility as well, but also in terms of green hydrogen, in terms of the energy transition. So, of course, the green energy production key project from the New Deal has quite an overlap with the other, let's say, energy transition goals of the Korean government. So, for example, the renewable energy plan that foresees that the share of renewables will be increased from currently 8% to 20% by 2030, and also the goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 play a role here when it comes to the New Deal. And there have been already some recent interesting projects in that field. So I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago where the government announced a big 8.2 gigawatt offshore wind farm project that's supposed to be completed by 2030, and it has allocated an investment of 48.5 trillion Korean won, which is already more than the green energy production key sector of the New Deal. And of course, there's also a couple of other projects that have already or that are in the process of being implemented, but in regard of time, I won't be able to, dive into them in detail. So of course, green energy presents a huge opportunity for European companies since they are leading oftentimes in that field, and they can also help providing certain components for these projects. So for example, with offshore wind, it's not just about wind turbines, it's also about cables and, installing these projects off the coast. Okay, so the biggest project or the biggest key project in terms of investment is actually the eco-friendly mobility. And 20.3 trillion Korean won are supposed to be invested in this by 2025. And of course, the targets or the goal is here to, on the one hand, improve the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles and for hydrogen vehicles on the one hand, and on the other hand, it goes hand in hand basically with putting more electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles on the road. So Korea is a manufacturing car making country with Hyundai Kia as the biggest company in the country, and of course they are also front runners when it comes to hydrogen mobility, and they're also not doing poorly, or pretty good actually, in electric mobility. So this, of course, plays also a key role when we look at the mobility sector. And recently, Korea has introduced or passed the hydrogen law, which basically governs how hydrogen vehicles, charging stations, fuel cells are handled from the regulatory perspective. Also, quite recently, MOTI, the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure and Energy, has announced that it wants to raise a 2 billion Korean won sort of research and development fund, and we have also money pledged from Hyundai, Korea Evaluation Institute of Industrial Technology, and the Bank of Korea. So a lot of money is being put into this sector. So we're going to see a lot of interesting developments in, let's say, the automotive industry, which is in a process of a transformation anyways. So this, of course, presents opportunities, especially maybe for OEM suppliers for these EVs and hydrogen vehicles, but also, of course, for companies who build the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure needed for these new mobility solutions. So in summary, the New Deal is a very big program. So that means, yeah, great opportunities from the one hand, because there's a lot of money to be involved, especially when you're in the field of renewable energy, when you produce high-tech devices, whether that be medical or measuring devices, mobility, I just mentioned, and of course, sort of as a cost-cutting topic, ICT, software and hardware. I think those are very, very much key components of this program. And since it is such a big program, it presents also a bit of a obstacle or hurdle, because with such a big program, it's just a question that how easy is it going to be to access these public funds, actually, because I'm sure that a certain degree of bureaucracy is unavoidable. So that is something that not just foreign companies have to encounter, but also Korean companies are facing these hurdles. And another factor probably, or another question that arises, is since the government is pushing a lot of these projects, the question is how exciting, or how excited is the private sector to jump on the train and boost this development as well. And I guess one of the biggest question marks are the presidential elections that are coming up next year. So who knows, with a change of leadership, if there should be one, what happens to the New Deal. If you want to know more, feel also free to contact us and check out the full report, which is about 30 plus pages. It doesn't give you an in-depth analysis of each industry that might be involved with, but it gives you a bit of an overview, and we spoke with a couple of industry experts to get their take on it. So to summarize or to close up, when you're planning to enter the market in Korea, what are like the key areas to focus on, especially in regard to the New Deal? I guess if I had to break it down, it would be 2 points, and one is know the market and find the right partner in order to develop your market entry strategy. So in general, that means, or in general, what is characteristic about the Korean market and its players is that South Koreans really value high tech, which often is provided by Swiss and German companies. But at the same time, these customers or partners can also be very demanding. So after sales is very important, and oftentimes it's required that you provide customized solutions and not just a size that fits all. So that is to be taken into account, and of course, know the market. Market intelligence is key. You have to know who are the main players, who are your competitors. You have to monitor the recent developments. I've spoken with some companies who have assigned people who just monitor the New Deal developments to see what other opportunities may arise from that. So that is also very, very important. And of course, finding partners. Some companies choose to enter the market through a distributor partner, and some companies choose to set up their own office, their branch office, or have a joint venture with another local partner. There is no right or wrong. It really depends on your business and your strategy. And if you have any questions on that, we're happy to advise you to get more market intelligence, to find the right partners. And last but not least, when looking into the New Deal, do keep in mind that this program is designed to boost the Korean economy, meaning it's supposed to also benefit most and foremost Korean companies, which doesn't exclude foreign companies. Foreign companies are legally not discriminated in terms of public tender processes, but nevertheless, I would say that the target here is definitely Korean companies and Korean companies. But here I would like to close, and I think this is just a very quick skip through different key projects of it, and we're happy to talk more about it with you. And I think even more interesting will be to hear what the industry experts, Mr. Thomas Schmidt and Mr. Peter Rüttlisberger, have to say about this, because they're already active in this field. Thank you very much.
Good, wonderful. Thank you very much, Felix, for this very insightful presentation. Maybe for the audience, you may have seen that on the bottom right of your screen, you have a Q&A button. So please use this. We're very happy also getting new questions that we then can address here on the panel. Our two panelists represent two important areas of the New Deal. On the one hand, the digital New Deal. On the other hand, the Green New Deal. They also represent a very large multinational company with subsidiaries in Korea and a small company working from a distance with local Korean partners. So again, here with us in Seoul is Mr. Thomas Schmidt, the head of Siemens Digital Industries Korea. Thomas has a long and successful track record with Siemens and worked, among other postings, for several years in China and in Japan. Joining us from Switzerland is the other panelists, Mr. Peter Röttlisberger, COO of Solaxes. Solaxes is a company developing and producing nanotechnology film for photovoltaic solar panel manufacturers. Peter too has a long international career in the renewable energy sector, especially in photovoltaics. So again, welcome to both Thomas and Peter.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get warmed up and let's get started. I'd like to open the discussion by asking Thomas and then afterwards Peter to give us a short elevator speech introducing your company and what kind of business you are currently conducting in Korea. So please, Thomas, go ahead.
Thank you, Roger. As you might know, under the Siemens brand, we have a family of 3 companies now. It's Siemens Energy, and Siemens Healthineers. Here in Korea, Siemens Limited Seoul was founded more than 50 years back in 1967. And currently it's present in all major cities with around 2,500 employees. Just for your reference, in case you arrive here at Incheon Airport, so your luggage will be handled by the baggage handling system from Siemens, and the fire alarm system and the building automation takes care about your safety. But I think we should more talk about the New Deal, and so I just want to take up what Felix explained to us now and bring it a little bit in context to what we are doing here at Siemens. So let me start with the digital New Deal. Siemens Digital Industries invested over the last few years more than 10 billion euro in building up a leading portfolio for digitalization. And this fits very well into the scope of the Korea country strategy New Deal. Beside our well-known automation portfolio, we support Korean companies with IoT cloud platforms, which we call MindSphere, and which can be used in the manufacturing industries, but also on the infrastructure side. We work together with customers on plant management and plant simulation, and very important for us, we have already a significant number of installed Teamcenter solution, which is the basis for designing and using digital twins. Our colleagues from Siemens Healthineers are very well established here in Korea for many years with imaging solutions like MRT and CT, and will support the development of the smart healthcare concept, which we just learned from Felix. For the Green New Deal, our smart infrastructure colleagues provide tailored solutions for managing buildings with the best energy efficiency and safety. I guess we come back later to this. Siemens Energy provides high efficient gas turbines, onshore and offshore windmills, and solutions to produce hydrogen. As you see, we are well prepared to support the idea of the Korea New Deal in many aspects. And I personally like the slogan of this New Deal, which is from a fast follower to a first mover economy. So I think as long as we keep in mind where we have a chance to contribute, it is a good place to be. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Thomas. That was very interesting, and will certainly trigger additional questions from our audience. Now, Peter, can I ask you to turn on your screen?
It is on.
Perfect. We can see you.
Yep.
So let's move on now to Peter and for his introduction. Peter, please go ahead.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. First of all, to be honestly, totally truth, I'm in Germany, but still eating Swiss chocolate there. But one of the titles of a former presentation from me was The Ugly Truth of PV. If you think about PV, what color gets you in mind? It's dark. The ugly truth of PV. SolAccess is working against this trend in helping our customers to produce PV panels looking like this. This is sorry?
Almost 200 participants. And we have to resolve some technical problems before we can actually hand back to Peter.
Okay.
I think we can hear him. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This is a full working PV module, same as this. Or what we started with was purely white. So why did we do that? We all of us know that decarbonization of mobility and heating system, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence need power. Where does this power come from? Power needs to be produced as close to the place of consumption as ever possible. What's always empty, not powered, are the facades. So we help our final customers to empower the facades of all buildings in order to transfer them from energy consumers to energy producers, energy generators. What we produce is basically a film, a nanotechnology film, as just mentioned by Roger. This is a terracotta one, this is the white one, which we sell to our customers, the PV module manufacturers and or to construction companies having a link there. SolAccess is a not too old, not too big company, very innovative and very fast in acting and deciding and inventing. We have more than 16 colors ready to be applied onto Korean buildings and make them even more nicer than they're looking today and more effective than they are today. That's it.
Thank you very much, Peter. So this offers us a unique and very different perspective, which is highly interesting for smaller and medium-sized companies, and how you entered the market. We will come to that later on. So I think one of the crucial questions that we have to address here while talking about the Korean New Deal is, what is in there for foreign companies? Both Siemens and SolAccess are foreign companies in Korea. So what is your take, if you start with Thomas, what is your take on the business opportunities for foreign companies from the New Deal?
So please understand that I cannot share with you specific projects here in the call, but I want to give you some ideas where we believe we have to focus on, and basically I want to mention 5 out of that. So the first topic is, I think it's very important. This is what we are doing, and this is what we also learned from Felix. We have to really analyze what is feasible and what could be potential focus areas that we can cover in the digital and the Green New Deal. So it does not really help to look for each and everything. We have to be very specific, and we have to look at where we have a chance as a foreign company to contribute to this New Deal. So the second topic, which goes along with the first topic, is that from our experience, it's crucial to team up with domestic companies. So build up a relationship with them, of course, in a compliant way is the way to go. And this is why, for example, we recently signed off some MOUs with Russell, for example, where we would like to cover the field of digital enterprise projects in various industries. or with KPMG in the field of cybersecurity consulting, because KPMG has a significant number of consultants here in Korea. And it's very interesting to see how they are able to sell this consulting service in the market. And finally, another field, LG Electronics, you mentioned this before, with the products which are also sold in Europe, of course. So here we signed off MOU focusing on joint research activities in the field of digital enterprise. So on the third one, I think, which is also very important, and we learned this a little bit in the discussion now. So I think it's important that we focus on technologies where the domestic companies are not advanced yet here. So for example, when it comes to hydrogen, so I think it's more important to focus on hydrogen upstream, so on the production of hydrogen, instead of focusing on the downstream side when it comes to fuel cells, where Hyundai, for example, is well advanced. And one topic, I think, going back to the European activities, currently we hear this all over the place about Gaia X. Also here in the past, especially the German government, together with the Korean government, had extensive discussions, and they also signed off MOU. I think this is also something we can consider how we can utilize this Gaia X approach here when it comes to the data lab.
Good, thank you. Peter, does this kind of cover the same experiences that you had so far? So kind of important, it seems to be teaming up with domestic companies and offering technologies where Korean competitors are not really kind of top-notch.
So basically, we fully share the same opinion, Thomas. It doesn't make sense to import goods to Korea. It makes a lot more sense to empower the local Korean industry. And this is exactly what you're doing as well. So it doesn't make sense to transport PV modules from 10,000 of kilometers away just to have them there. It makes a lot more sense to have the know-how there. Our technology is unique, patented, and it's unique on the globe. It's not only unique in Korea or in Switzerland. And this is how we operate. We are looking for partners which are really active in the market, which want to become a part of this new deal, of this new Green Deal, and which then are becoming our customers. We focus on what we know to do, developing and manufacturing our beautiful films, and empowering local partners, especially in Korea, where the industry is very strong, high quality, very fast, very keen. So we try to do whatever is possible in order to make buildings attractive and powerful.
Good, thank you. If I can continue with you, Peter, you're a small company and you do not, let's say, not yet have a subsidiary here in Korea. So how did you go about finding reliable business partners without the subsidiary? Was it not difficult to establish such a partnership from a distance?
First of all, Roger, thank you for the not yet. It gives perspective giving. Secondly, because of my former activities, I had quite a network in Korea before joining Solaccess. So we decided to go without an agent or something similar for Korea, what worked pretty well. We are in contact with Measures Cologne and Measures Shinsung, our first customers there, since 2017. And since 2017, I'd been to Korea, I don't know, maybe 10 times. Last time was in February 2020. To build up the trust, to explain, to make hours of drawings and pictures and to get the trust. And out of this personal relationship, we are now able to say we understand each other pretty well and can continue with all these video conferencing tools up to the moment where even Swiss people will be allowed again to travel. So yes, it was difficult at the beginning because nobody was expecting us, nobody was knowing us, nobody knew what we are going to do and how it works. And now it is accepted, and first projects had been realized already in Seoul, and furthermore projects are in the pipeline. But it needs time, as we are small and new, and we don't have the branding yet as Siemens has. We are the small Solaccess, the innovative Solaccess, and the trustful Solaccess.
Very good, thank you. An add-on question on relative to the current pandemic. Did you take special measures to keep up the relationship at a distance, not being able to travel? And if so, what did you do?
Yeah, excellent question. Try to be in contact as much as possible, but not too much in order not to bother the people. Really, how to say, being sensible, reading between the lines, asking for clarifications, having all this Zoom and Teams and other kind of meetings, and try to stay in contact as good as ever possible, which is not always very easy, neither for our Korean friends nor for us, but we manage it pretty good, I'd say.
All right, so maybe Thomas, you have the same kind of challenges, because very often you were not able to actually meet the client, so you also have probably to revert back to video conference, right?
So for sure, so we could see in all these online activities how it really went up dramatically. So when we look back, so since Korea is quite traditional in the way of dealing with each other, so in the past we already had a lot of direct contact, but during this pandemic, now you could really see the acceptance, at least temporarily, of these online activities.
Okay, very good. So I quickly check with Felix. Do we have any questions from our audience?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions, and you still have time to add more, so please type them in through the Q&A section. So there is one question that goes a bit towards Siemens, I believe. So we haven't really talked about it in the New Deal, because I don't think there's much on this in the New Deal, but maybe you can add something on that. Question is, does Siemens have any R&D plans when it comes to hydropower tech?
So hydropower or to hydrogen?
Hydropower, yeah. So I would assume this is not, not hydrogen. Hydropower is actually.
So for hydropower, we working together with Voigt, but hydropower itself here in Korea, at least to my knowledge, is not such a big issue, since it's quite limited here. So it's more about hydrogen. So I'm not sure about the question. So if we talk about hydrogen, so it's very much in the focus of also the new Green Deal, and there is a clear plan for the coming decades how to boost the production of hydrogen, but then also of course to utilize hydrogen, especially on the mobility sector.
Okay.
So from this regard, looking at hydrogen, so we have a quite good technology in place and working on that as I mentioned, on the upstream part, so to produce hydrogen. And of course, it's a very interesting field we would like to introduce together with partners also here in Korea.
Okay. All right, good. Any other questions from the audience so far?
I'm sure there are a couple of more too, but let me just pick on one. Logistical questions. Can we receive the documentation of the session? So yeah, you will get a follow-up email where we will share a bit of material related to this session afterwards. So don't worry.
Okay, then I have my next question for both of our panelists. The large and New Deal projects will be announced by public tenders. So do you, Thomas and Peter, do you have any experience with public tenders here in Korea?
So if I start there, so of course we have the experience from the past with public tenders, and I have to say they are quite open and to local and to foreign companies. So, and as long as the bidders can fulfill the technical and the commercial requirements, there is no discrimination in this regard. So for the public tenders in Korea, there is also not, let's say, a more bureaucratic process as we know from Europe. So also in this regard, I think there is not so much difference there. So, but what is an issue is, of course, in terms of requirements to be a qualified bidder, it can be critical to foreign companies to find a solution how to team up with local companies. So especially when it comes to local content. So this is an important issue which has to be considered.
Okay, I think that's a very important answer to this. No, there is no discrimination towards non-Korean companies. I think that's a very good news that we just heard from Siemens. So, Peter, do you have also, with your local partners here, any experiences with public tenders?
This time my answer will be rather short. No.
Good.
Because our customers do have these experiences, and we focus on what we can, and our customers focus on what they know, and so it is local to local for all tendering activities.
Yes, perfect. So, but we heard that there is no discrimination, which is of course a nice thing. I find good. There is another couple of questions from the audience. So Felix is signaling. Yes.
Yeah, there's one more, and that goes again towards Siemens in the field of smart factories. So there is a question. Do you see chances for Siemens to participate in the smart factory program for Korean SMEs? Or is that rather something that is exclusive to Korean companies? So I understand there is another separate program.
So this is a very good question because this it was introduced even before the New Deal. And of course, we looked at this very much in detail, how we can contribute to that, because it really goes to the topic of how to support this transformation process on the industry side. So, of course, we have the portfolio in place with our automation products and with our solutions on the digitalization side. But on the other hand, going back to the bureaucracy, of course, this is something we have to discuss with the SMEs, with the small medium enterprises, which are the target group, how they can get this funding from the government. So I think it's not so much about that we are the one who are able to get this funding, which will be not the case. It's targeting the small medium enterprises to support them in order to, as I said, to work on that transition. So we will again also here we will work together with partners, and we will design the right offering, and we are on the way to discuss this also, and we already did this already in some cases. Where we then support the small medium enterprises with solutions where they can get the funding from the government.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So I'd like to shorten a bit the question. Probably many of our audiences, they are really considering how to get projects out of the New Deal. So Thomas, and also then let's start with Peter. So as long as the connection is stable, Peter, if you have, let's say, 3 recommendations for Swiss SMEs, how to enter the Korean market and how to probably try to get the potential out of the New Deal, what would be your 3 recommendations to these Swiss companies?
Know the value chain, know the local value chain, define the drivers there. Who is deciding, who is influencing, and then try to contact the deciding people, which is not that easy at the moment. We are lucky that we are in contact with our people since 2017. And then be trustful. Say what you think what you say, and if you say that they will get a reply by 2 hours, then you have to do it within 1.5 hours. If you promise something, you always keep your promises, always. Or if you can't, then you inform as soon as ever possible. That means build up trust and credibility, and this will take some time. That's not a hamburger deal. It's a long time. And then you have to be sure about the capabilities, quality of your product. You can't sell a bad product into Korea. Either it's among the best, or you should not try it. You leave it. Otherwise, you really have to leave it. And this is what we are convinced. We are good. We are very good. Our customers are better than we are, and they have the relation. So it takes time, especially if you do it from a certain distance.
Good. So what is your take on this question, Thomas?
So if I would have to choose 3 topics, so one topic goes back to what Peter said, I think in terms of culture. So culture and the business is really based on trust. So it's not that you come in, you say something and you will leave here. So it really takes time. You have to build up trust, and it means you have to build up personal relationship. So without that, it might be very difficult to enter the market and to do business. And with this cultural topic, maybe also link is when you look at this, maybe in particular to this New Deal topic, you will find that most of the documents are in Korean. So I think it's also required that you have somebody who can work on the Korean side to really to know the details what's going on. So this is one topic. Another topic, maybe this is more linked to the multinationals. But I think it's an important topic because we also always think about how to do, to be honest. So typically as a multinational, you have your intellectual property rights located on headquarters side. And of course, countries like Korea are very, very motivated to support R&D activities in Korea. But this also means that you have to see how to deal with IP rights management. Yes, and this is an issue. As a hint, you have to look at how you do it. So this is the second topic, and the third topic. What I think is also important here in Korea, and somehow also linked to the New Deal, because it's a huge invest. What we learned from Felix before. And it also means that the government has an issue with funding. So they are very accurate in tax audits. So I think it's also very important that you are very compliant, that you know very much in detail how the tax issue works in Korea, but it is as also in other countries. But I think Korea is very accurate in how they are doing it. And so I would also recommend to be very familiar with these regulations. But nevertheless, I mean, first of all, and I think this is the most important message, at least this was my experience when I came here to Korea. So luckily for European one, the Korean law is very similar to the European, or let's say to the German law. So it's not such difficult to understand the regulations and the law, and I think this is also a good entry opportunity here in the market.
Okay, if I may quickly recap these answers to this, I think, very important question. So if it's trust, it's building personal relationships. Peter also mentioned speed. That's in my view very important in Korea. And sometimes, in my experience, Swiss companies, maybe also German companies, they sometimes are not really aware of the fact that Korea is really kind of a fast-moving country. And Peter said if he kind of wants to deliver within 2 hours, he delivers within 1.5 hours. And I think that's the right approach. What was also mentioned is that you should really kind of look after your IP and how you manage your IP. And what was mentioned, and this is I hear many large companies telling me that they have to deal very, very clearly with taxes and being really 150% tax compliant. I think that's also an important statement. Right, I quickly checked with Felix. If there are any other questions?
Plenty. I'm afraid we won't be able to answer all of them.
Okay, so pick the best one.
Well, there's one question that we can maybe answer, actually. Okay. So there's one question: how should SMEs, so I assume those would be German or Swiss SMEs, approach Korean prospects to introduce their companies or products in the first place? Cold calls, emails, or how should they go about it?
Okay, do you want to answer or should I answer?
Well, we can make it short. Talk to us. We'll help you to make an introduction. No, I mean, maybe I'll say a few things and you add to that. So, of course, you can try reaching out to potential partners in Korea once you've found them already. However, doing this in English is sometimes a bit of a long shot. So English emails are usually not always replied upon. So that's why we actually offer this support for companies where we not just email companies in Korean, we also call them, introduce your products or your company to the potential partners, help you to also read a bit between the lines. Are they really interested in working with us, or are they just polite? And yeah, maybe you would like to add.
Yes, question was, does cold calling work? And in my view, cold calling from Europe in English is probably a very hard way getting some replies. Also, as was mentioned, email in English, they very often just, there is this button called delete, and that's where your email might end up. So by all means, if you're a German company, first talk to the German chamber here. If you're a Swiss company, talk to the Swiss Business Hub. If you are another company, talk to your kind of market people that we have here in Korea. So this is just one phone call away, but the time spent on this one is probably very valuable. They might be able to open your doors, and this really kind of cuts a lot of frustration on your end, and also it can cut also a lot of time and eventually cost at your end. That's the reason we are here, so please talk to us. So I'm not trying to sell our services, not at all here, but we are here actually helping you to get inroads in this very dynamic market.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are so many more questions. Let me just pick one maybe for you, okay, Thomas.
So last or second last question, because we're already
we're running out of time. Okay, then we'll just skip the questions. You will have the
No. Just go ahead. One
short question. So smart cities, as you know, smart cities is also a big topic in Korea, and this is quite specific. So the question is, so Siemens has the platform MindSphere, which I believe is used in smart manufacturing. And the question is, are there also ideas to maybe introduce this into the smart city landscape? And could that be an option?
So as I mentioned at the beginning, the target market is beside the manufacturing industries, also the infrastructure market. So we also have installations here, even on the power supply side. So yes, of course, MindSphere is also targeting the smart building.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Is there a question maybe from a small or medium-sized enterprise? Last one.
There are so many, it's difficult to keep up. Thank you very much for all the questions. We'll follow up with them in advance. Yes. Maybe more of a general question. Technology is Swiss and I guess German technology ready to be a device supplier for green energy production. We're looking for a partner in Korea who can cooperate to bring it to the Korean market. So I guess we'll just talk afterwards with you. Sorry that I can't really follow up on all of the questions, and we're a bit running out of time. So maybe closing from your side.
So again, there's so many questions. We had really a large audience, and I have to apologize for the technical hiccups we had, but we were not really kind of expecting nearly 200 people attending this webinar, which is a good thing in my view. So as Felix mentioned, we are going to follow up. So we have your email address. We send email if you have additional questions, or if we weren't able to answer your questions. Please get in touch with the relevant organizations. In the German case, with our friends of the German Chamber. In the Swiss case, with the Swiss Business Hub. You have all the information readily available. We do the follow-up as soon as possible. You will get a short version of the report. If you want to have the long version, we make this available on our websites, Switzerland Global Enterprise and the German Chamber here in Korea. And you can get this report for very little money. So it took us quite a while really going through all this documentation and coming up with a sensible report. As it was mentioned, and I just would like to mention this again, you will not find all the answers for your specific industry, but you will find general answers. And if you have then questions for your specific industry, for your specific company, again, please get in touch. So we will be more than happy really helping you if you have plans to enter in the Korean market. I think that's all from our side. Again, thank you very much for joining us, and a big thank you to our panelists, Thomas here in Seoul and Peter sitting in Switzerland, and also to our producer Saul, who was kind of probably sweating blood in the beginning, but eventually I think it was a good and a sensible live session. So thank you very much, take care, and hopefully talking to you soon. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
감사합니다.